and this is Weaponized.
This was a very straightforward guy, hard-charging, honest as the day is long. I mean, I was really impressed by the guy, and I was impressed that he would put me into the circle of trust and talk to me at all. And I agreed. I was not going to do a report. I never did a news story about him. I never mentioned his name. Years later now, I feel comfortable in doing that because he's out of government. But he came back from that meeting and was pretty disappointed. He said,
So hold on, Dick D'Amato still alive?
yeah, he is.
Man, I would love to hear from Dick D'Amato what that experience was like.
People have tried to reach out to him, other people, because the name has filtered out over the years. But he wants nothing to do with it.
Well,
but,
now,
yeah.
Now it's going to be crazy.
When he came back from that meeting and we had a conversation, he was disappointed that he wasn't able to confirm the kinds of things that Lazar had told us and that we'd reported. But he said, look, I think it is entirely feasible that this UFO cover-up exists within a private company. A company, he said, it could be done in a company like EG&E or Lockheed or Northrop, one of those big defense contractors. And he said, here's the deal. When it comes out, if I can prove that they've been diverting money from national security efforts and programs to keep this UFO cover-up going, people are going to go to prison. Which, if you think about it, that might be the best reason of all for the UFO cover-up is if people think that their butts are on the line, they'll go to behind bars for lying about it to Congress, the American public, and maybe diverting money.
Do you think, this is a big topic of conversation, we're in a new era, hopefully, where AARO, All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, is not going to be a Project Blue Book, that they are going to actively research, which we have indications they are, and that they're going to have a forward public-facing element where they're not confusing the American public and global public. They're going to be straight. So my question to you is, and this is a big topic of conversation, do you think people should go to prison if they've been part of the UFO cover-up?
I don't know. I guess it would depend on how egregious the acts were that they did. I mean, I can understand. In 1947, something strange crashes in the desert outside New Mexico. We've just come out of World War II. It's been a terrible, catastrophic war all over the globe. What happens? How will the public react to this unknown threat, a really exotic possible threat? I mean, people might freak out. I could see them deciding they don't want to put the American public through it, especially because no one knew for sure what it was, how the technology worked. Could we duplicate it? Did the Russians know about this or what?
In defense of the UFO cover-up, secrets should be kept, some. But as Bob Lazar has always said, the general topic that's outside of the scope of a national security issue for our country, the general public has a need to know and a right to know. And we feel a duty to try and find out. I don't think anybody involved with the cover-up should face any prison time. I don't care what they've done. I think there should be immunity. And I think that this topic is so much more important than putting somebody maybe with a family behind bars because they were doing what they thought was right for the country. Even if they lied to Congress and Senate, and even if they hid and misappropriated funds, I would like if we said, give everybody immunity, let's bring humanity up to date with what we know. So I would like to say that nobody should be, in my personal opinion, should be in trouble for that. I think we should move on. Let's move on.
I'm with you on that up to a point. There are lines that should not be crossed.
Like what?
If you threaten to kill somebody, or if you actually do silence them through violence.
Got you. Agreed.
That's
Agreed.
Far.
Agreed. If somebody did that in the past, fucking lock them away. Yeah.
So Dick D'Amato comes out. He says, look, I think this program could be housed in a private company as a way to keep Congress from finding out about it. And if that happens and we can prove it, somebody would go to prison. I had the feeling from that conversation on that he was going to stick with it. So I told him about Al O'Donnell without telling him who Al O'Donnell was. I said, I've been meeting with this guy who told me X, and I gave him the story. Could I meet him? Do you think he'd be willing to talk to me? Off the record. I said, well, let me ask him. So I reached out to Al, hadn't talked to him in a while, and I told him about Senator Dick D'Amato and the Senator Byrd and what they wanted to do. And Al said, okay, I'll meet with him. I'll talk to him. And he did. And so he didn't, Al did not fess up. He didn't give him the whole routine that he had told me about, but he told him some of it. And he said, look, I'll talk to you further if my old boss, Herb Greer, one of the EG&G folks, the only one who was still alive, if he says I can tell you about it, I'll tell you about it. And so Dick D'Amato goes to see Herb Greer.
Okay, so this is somebody that is now being contacted, who's active within EG&G, one of the top three,
Yeah, one of the three
one of the
co-founders.
Gs.
Yeah.
One of the Gs.
Right.
And he's like,
Herb Greer meets with D'Amato and says, yeah, I don't remember any of that flying saucer stuff, but if Al says it, okay, you can go ahead and meet with him. He has my permission. When he went back, met with Al O'Donnell wouldn't tell him anything. Shut it down. I don't know really why, because I never got the straight story from either of the two parties, but he clammed up. So he's not talking to D'Amato. He won't talk to me anymore, at least for a long time. And maybe that's the end of it for the story. Well, it's not the end of it. Well, a couple of years later, I start hearing hints that Al O'Donnell had changed his story, that he's telling a different version of it. And the way it came about is there's a journalist named Annie Jacobson, and she's a writer for the LA Times, had a good reputation. She started working on a book about Area 51. In 2007, she says she heard from a relative that there was a group called the Roadrunners. Well, I'd been reporting on them for a couple of years. The Roadrunners are all these veterans who had worked out at Area 51. They'd worked for the CIA, they'd worked for different contractors, test pilots, had high-level security clearances, had toiled in obscurity out at that base to protect the Americans. That's where the Cold War was won, is out there on the U-2 and then the A-12 and the Blackbird planes and later stealth. But
so all these normal projects that are like, really specialized reconnaissance platforms, planes, super fast, super high. That's what the Roadrunners is? Is there like a
Roadrunners had worked at Area 51 to develop these spy planes that helped us win the Cold War. And they'd worked on a lot of other CIA monkey businose and technology out there at Area 51. A lot of really interesting things that go on.
Monkey business, man. Monkey business.
I had the ultimate respect for all those men and women, even though we'd done these stories about Lazar and saucers and all that, which they didn't hold in very high regard. But they invited me in 2005 to their annual event. It was not open to the public. T.D. Barnes was the head of the Roadrunners at the time, and he invited me to go to this event where they all got together. And I was the first press person to allowed in it. I was the first to bring a camera in there, and they did the first on-camera interviews ever about the programs they worked on. They got permission for the CIA to talk to me, and it was awesome. I did stories that year in 05, again in 06 and 07. 07, somebody tells Annie Jacobson that the Roadrunners exist, and she starts pursuing a story, thinking that she's the first one on the trail, and she puts together a really good book called Area 51, An Uncensored History. She interviewed dozens of these guys, a lot of the people that I had interviewed before, and others beyond that. She dug up a lot of documents and the history of the base and programs that had gone on out there, and she puts together this book, and it's terrific, up until the last 7 pages. And in the last 7 pages of her book, she tells a story about Al O'Donnell without naming it.
Whoa.
Except the story she tells that Al O'Donnell shared with her is very different from the one he told me years before.
Okay, but did you know that Annie had, it sounds like a great book, I should read it. Did you know that she had got a hold of this guy that you had gotten a hold of how many decades before?
No, I didn't know that she was in touch with him. I knew she was talking to the other guys because she had wanted to talk to me for the book too. I'd done a lot of reporting on Area 51, so I knew she was talking to TD and the other Roadrunners. I had no idea that Al O'Donnell was one of them because he wasn't part of the Roadrunners. He wasn't part of that group.
Look, man, people could, this is why I'm glad we record sessions like this, because people could, they would conserve so much of their energy and time if they just went back and went to you about what you had done before. And that's the thing that really helps me, is that you have done a lot of this before. So now we're at a point where we got a book. The book is really good. It's kind of explaining all of this. And she got Al O'Donnell, but doesn't name him. So hold on. Has the world ever heard the name Al O'Donnell yet about this?
Yeah, it's come out a couple of times. I confided in a couple of people about Al O'Donnell and what was coming, and just keep it quiet. Somebody spilled it anyway. In fact, it came out at the citizens' hearing that you were part of.
Are you serious?
It came out in testimony there. They quoted me as telling them the story. They used the name without my permission.
it.